I want to thank you for letting me be myself again.
He was once the electrifying conductor of a musical revolution, an artist who blended rock, R&B, and raw soul to create an unmistakable new groove. At the height of his fame, he both mirrored and propelled the civil rights movement, captivating audiences with boundary-breaking live shows. Then, just as he seemed invincible, Sly Stone vanished. Rumors swirled. Some said he was living in near isolation, others claimed he wandered from place to place, and a few suspected even darker reasons behind his absence. For a figure often hailed as a prophet of funk, the mysterious retreat only enhanced the legend. How did this charismatic visionary turn into a ghost of his former self? And why is his impact still so profound, even though he's been off the radar for decades? The tale of Sly Stone isn't a neat success story with a tidy ending, it's a wild, genre-defying roller coaster that soared on psych-infused hits and fell victim to swirling controversies. We'll explore the ambition that pushed him to unite audiences across racial lines, how he channeled psychedelic influences into unstoppable grooves, and the forces, some internal, some external, that brought it all crashing down. Prepare for a journey that peels back the layers of a funk pioneer whose name might be less recognized by younger generations, but whose music influences every dance floor to this day. If you thought you knew the story, brace yourself for revelations that raise even more questions. But that wasn't the entire story. Long before he rebranded himself as Sly Stone, Sylvester Stewart grew up in Vallejo, California, surrounded by a loving but disciplined household that emphasized religious music. He sang gospel with his siblings, honing a vocal skill that would later set him apart. By his teenage years, his gifts already stood out. This wasn't just a kid singing in the church choir. He had perfect pitch, an uncanny sense of rhythm, and an appetite for blending genres in ways traditionalists frowned upon. The future star also learned multiple instruments, from guitar to piano, itching to weave them into something distinctly his. In the mid-1960s, Sylvester Stewart found a foothold in the local Bay Area music scene. He became a DJ, carving out a reputation for spinning an eclectic mix that fused soul pop and whatever else caught his ear. The radio gig also showcased his personality. Bright, charming, and outspoken, he could draw an audience in with little more than a well-placed soundbite. By 1967, the seeds had sprouted into a full-fledged experiment, a band called Sly and the Family Stone. Composed of black and white members, men and women, it was a radical concept for a period still wrestling with segregation and gender norms. Audiences took immediate notice. The group's early hits displayed a raw but infectious energy, spiking record sales and capturing the attention of both mainstream pop fans and more underground music lovers. Critics saw him as a rising force who challenged the notion that certain genres had to stay separate. Rock could mingle with soul, funk could incorporate pop, and old-school R&B chords could find new life with psychedelic undertones. The moment was prime for a figure like Sly Stone to step up. Little did anyone suspect how quickly he'd climb to the top and how hard the eventual fall would be. What happened next would shock fans everywhere. Part of Sly Stone's magic was his timing. In the late 1960s, the United States was embroiled in social tension. Civil rights activism was at its peak, anti-war sentiment rumbled, and youth culture was hungry for new expressions of unity and protest. Sly and the Family Stone didn't just provide a party soundtrack, they lived the change they sang about. Their lineup, featuring black and white musicians, male and female, all sharing the stage, became a visual representation of harmony in a fractured era. Not many mainstream bands made that statement just by existing. Songs like Dance to the Music, and Everyday People reverberated with positivity, but they weren't fluffy. Beneath the catchy hooks, Sly embedded messages of equality, unity, and optimism, inspiring both fans and fellow artists. Performances exuded raw joy, laced with a hint of rebellion that resonated across generational and racial lines. Woodstock 1969 was a defining moment for the band. While the festival teemed with iconic acts, Sly Stone took the stage at a pivotal moment and ignited the crowd. It was one of those landmark events that stamped the band's name into music history, proving they had the power to unify thousands of strangers through a single musical experience. But Sly Stone's persona went deeper than mere showmanship. He carried himself with the conviction of a preacher, proclaiming messages of empowerment that felt necessary during a time of civil unrest. Some even called him a prophet of funk, a spiritual guide weaving socially conscious lyrics into unstoppable grooves. The world took notice, from rebellious teenagers to industry moguls who scrambled to capitalize on the new phenomenon. And while the band was busy touring and recording, Sly Stone reveled in the spotlight, eventually adopting a more extravagant lifestyle that seemed to foreshadow storms on the horizon. After all, how long can you stay on top before the cracks start to show? Yet that was only the beginning. The word psychedelic might conjure up swirling colors and mind-altering substances, both of which played a role in Sly Stone's creative process, at least according to widespread rumors. By the time albums like Stand in 1969 and There's a Riot Going On 1971 rolled around, the band had evolved. Gone were the purely upbeat anthems. In their place, haunting grooves and introspective lyrics emerged. Tracks like Family Affair explored themes of familial bonds and social fractures, capturing the tumultuous spirit of the early 70s. The production style was murkier, often layered with fuzz and distortion that mirrored both internal band tensions and the broader cultural shift from hope to disillusionment. Stories circulated that Sly's interest in LSD and other substances became more than just an occasional indulgence. Some close associates whispered that he used them to tap into new musical dimensions, unlocking rhythms and harmonies that straddled sanity and chaos. That might explain the dreamlike quality in certain recordings, a swirling tapestry of drums and bass that felt as if it came from another realm. Despite critics labeling his behavior eccentric, or worse, fans were enthralled. The music had a bite that defied the concept of neat categorization. At the same time, Sly Stone never lost the impulse to comment on social issues. Even as the vibe grew darker, the underlying commentary about race, inequality, and everyday struggles remained. It resonated with people facing the harsh realities of post-civil rights America, where progress and backlash coexisted uneasily. Journalists marveled at how Sly seemed both accessible and deeply elusive, like a messenger from the underworld of funk who brought back cryptic revelations. The result? Adoration in some corners, suspicion in others. And behind the scenes, a different story was taking shape, one of mounting internal friction, external pressures, and a star who seemed pulled by forces beyond his control. But the darkness was about to overshadow the bright revolution. When a band experiences meteoric success, the pressures can multiply. According to those who were in Sly's orbit, the combination of relentless touring, high expectations, and personal demons began to wear on him. What started as mild unpredictability escalated into canceled shows, late arrivals, and bandmates growing frustrated with a leader they once idolized. Accusations surfaced about drug-fueled paranoia, with some claiming Sly had retreated into a world of suspicion, seeing enemies in every corner of the industry. Band members left, replacements came and went, and fans who had once praised Sly as a unifying force started questioning his reliability. Speculation ran wild in the tabloids, painting him as an erratic genius on the brink of collapse. Stories recounted lavish parties that ended in chaos, fueling talk that maybe the prophet of funk had become lost in his own illusions. Meanwhile, the music itself shifted. While albums still sold, critics pointed out a decline in consistency, often attributing it to Sly's rumored substance issues. The performances that once felt electrifying now swung unpredictably between moments of brilliance and near fiasco. By the mid-1970s, the unstoppable wave Sly and the family Stone had ridden began to crash onto the rocky shore. One of the more persistent whispers involved a sense of betrayal within the group itself. Some ex-members complained about money disputes, while others mentioned that Sly's volatile moods made collaboration next to impossible. The swirl of rumors was dense, and without official explanations, fans were left to piece together contradictory narratives. Sly Stone's star power hadn't fully vanished. It was simply overshadowed by rumors that he'd lost interest in preserving either his relationships or his legacy. Yet no one could have guessed the extent of his eventual disappearance, and that was just a prelude to a deeper silence. Before long, the headlines about Sly Stone shifted from flashy performances to the confounding question, where is he? Whereas artists like James Brown or George Clinton remained in the public eye, Sly took a different path. He released sporadic albums that failed to gain the traction of earlier efforts, and his public appearances dwindled to almost nothing. Rumors exploded about his living conditions. Some said he was living in a modest house, cutting ties with all but a few confidants. Others insisted he was homeless, residing in a van parked on the streets of Los Angeles. Later, scattered interviews seemed to confirm that he had indeed gone through a period of financial strain, with royalties loyalties tied up in complicated contracts. Legal scuffles reportedly drained him, forcing him into reclusion. People who tried to track him down found the search near impossible, as though he'd evaporated from the scene he once dominated. Tabloid outlets printed scandalous theories. Was he intentionally evading taxes or lawsuits? Or was it simply that he could no longer cope with the chaos of the music industry he once helped revolutionize? Around 2011, a string of articles captured photos of him living in an RV. Fans were shocked. How could a man responsible for chart-topping hits be in such a state? Some regarded it as a cautionary tale about the fickle nature of fame. Others believed it was a deliberate choice, part of a deeper statement on the emptiness of celebrity culture. Either way, his invisibility only intensified the legend. Sly Stone, once a luminary of stage and vinyl, had seemingly retreated into an isolated realm, leaving behind more questions than answers. But the legend was far from over. Despite his vanishing act, Sly Stone occasionally re-emerged, either performing at surprise gigs or making cameo appearances. Each time, news outlets and social media lit up with speculation. Was this the start of a triumphant comeback? Could the funk prophet still reclaim his throne? But the sightings were fleeting, often followed by long stretches of silence. Some fans held on to hope for new music or a definitive statement about his past. Others resigned themselves to the idea that Sly Stone preferred his mythic status to the messy realities of public life. In recent years, rumors popped up about a memoir, potentially titled in reference to one of his famous tracks. Reports hinted that he was revisiting old stories, possibly keen on setting the record straight, or even exposing more controversies that had been tucked away. Yet confirmation remained elusive, as did any consistent updates on his living situation or health. When asked directly, Sly tended to dodge specifics, leaving fans reading between the lines for clues. Even longtime collaborators hinted that they, too, were mostly in the dark. Still, his influence refuses to fade. Contemporary artists sample Sly and the Family Stone's work. New generations discover If You Want Me to Stay or Family Affair and find the music shockingly relevant even decades later. In that sense, the silence may contribute to his legacy. By stepping out of the endless social media cycle, he preserved an aura of mystery that suits the man once labeled a funk prophet. The question remains whether we'll ever see a grand return, or if Sly Stone will remain behind the thick curtains he drew around himself. And yet, the final chapter might still be unwritten. Sly Stone's story stands as one of the music world's most captivating enigmas. He was never just a performer, he was a bridge connecting genres, an evangelist for racial unity, and a messenger who brought psychedelia to funky new heights. Then, at the apex of his powers, he seemed to sabotage his trajectory, stepping away from fame to drift on the margins. For some, it's a tragic cautionary tale about the perils of meteoric stardom. For others, it's a testament to an artist's refusal to play by conventional rules, living life on his own terms, even if those terms meant fading into near anonymity. Despite the speculation, the messy lawsuits, the rumored substance problems, and the fractured personal relationships, Sly's imprint on music is too deep to vanish. From jam sessions on late-night stages to modern digital playlists, the echoes of his genius remain impossible to ignore. Songs like Dance to the Music, Everyday People, and Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again continue to pulse in the background of cultural consciousness, reminding us of a moment when it felt like all boundaries could be broken by a tight groove and a fearless band. Will he emerge again for a final statement, a culminating act that clarifies the decades of rumors? Or will Sly Stone's myth remain an unfinished legend, ensuring that each generation rediscovers him anew, layering more intrigue onto an already otherworldly story? One thing is certain, the man who once united countless fans in defiance of social barriers remains an emblem of possibility and an everlasting question mark. Perhaps, in disappearing, he's reached an even loftier status, solidifying the notion that sometimes the greatest prophets are the ones who slip away, leaving their disciples to interpret the sacred texts they left behind.